los geht's. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our session today. My name is Michel Clement, and I'm very happy that I have my co-author Edlira Shehu in the talk, which we will do together. Edlira, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Michel. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here as well. Michel and I have been working on blood donation for quite some years. I was at the University of Hamburg before. Now I'm at the Copenhagen Business School. And yeah, this is one project that we work together upon and would like to present you.
Yes, and my name is Michel Clement. I'm holding a chair in marketing at the University of Hamburg. And we have, since more than 10 years, a very close cooperation together with the German Red Cross, and we study the impact of marketing instruments on donation behavior. And doing this, we have been in close contact to many other blood donation services as well. And one of them is the Austrian Red Cross. And the data that we have been using and the project that we are proposing today has been done in joint cooperation with the Austrian Red Cross. I would like to share my slides now, and we will then proceed. All right, today's paper is joint work from Edlira and myself, and also with Thorsten Chandler. He is a PhD student at the Healthcare Center at the University of Hamburg, which is also a closely cooperating partner with the Institute of Marketing. Today's talk is about the impact of temporary deferrals on future blood donation behavior across the donor life cycle. And the questions and the storyline that we focused on are actually grounded on a paper which has been published in Transfusion very lately, and it is an open access paper, so you would be and should be able to actually access this paper accordingly. Okay, so what's the story about the paper? Now, we do know that there is typically a negative impact of deferral on subsequent donation behavior. We have found numerous studies that have been researching this topic on the quantitative side, but also on the qualitative side, for example, by using interviews. So typically we know that there is a specific negative impact of a temporal deferral of an individual on subsequent blood donation behavior. However, we do see a substantial gap, not only from the scientific perspective, but also from the managerial perspective, about the factors that actually might moderate the impact of the temporary deferrals. So specifically, our target is we would like to better understand how specific donor experience and also the number of previous deferrals have actually an impact on the overall negative effect of a deferral. Or framed differently, do people that have a larger experience or that have experienced previous deferrals already, do they behave differently when they are being deferred for the next time, yes or no? And this is actually the goal of our research. Now, we have been studying, of course, the literature, and there is a substantial set of, from my point of view, very good papers that have been published in our field. These papers rely on different data sets from different countries. We have data sets from Switzerland, or United States, Australia, Canada, but also from the German Red Cross or from St. Queen. And we typically observe that more or less most of the studies report a negative effect of a deferral on subsequent donation behavior. They do differ with respect to the methods, they do differ with respect to the data, but from a very generalizable point of view, you can typically say that a temporary deferral is not really helpful in retaining a customer or in retaining a donor. So this is the overall view, but we want to focus on the moderating effects, and therefore we would like to zoom in. Because we think that the past research actually showed that actually deferred donors are less likely to return, but there is this very ugly topic of what actually happens with the first-time donors. So do we believe, or do we see that first-time donors behave actually even more negative in a way that they won't return after a deferral or not. And there are some indications in the field, and this is something we would like to focus on more specifically with respect to the donor's life cycle. So do they behave differently when they are being deferred at the first time, or is it a different effect when they have gained a substantial amount of experience in the past? Now, that's what we're going to contribute to the literature. So we look at the donor experience and the number of previous deferrals on a continuous scale. And this actually allows us to estimate the additional impact per year of donor experience on the likelihood of return. And specifically, we account for a potential endogeneity of the temporary deferrals, because a deferral is not just a random thing to happen, but it is actually really related to donor health conditions. And therefore, we have to somehow account for this potential endogeneity effect. We do this statistically, which will report it in our model section. Now, theoretically, there should be a difference. Why should there be a difference? You can see here that we differentiate theoretically the expected impact of a deferral by several donor stages. And we look at the first-time donors here on the left side. We look in the middle on the impact of novice donors, which we consider to be donations 2 to 4, or more experienced donors that have at least donated 5 or more times. And we looked into the literature in social psychology, but also in marketing and also in the field of blood donations. And we found a set of streams that also allow us to differentiate why there should be a different impact on the subsequent donation behavior after a deferral. So I don't want to go through all of these in detail, but I would like to highlight a few of these to motivate our theoretical foundation. So for example, a first-time donor, when it comes to attitudes, has of course certain feelings and beliefs about giving blood, but it's not really sophisticated attitude yet. And the reason is there is hardly any experience with donating blood. However, on the other side, when you are an experienced donor, you already have let's say not only experiences, but also a large set of know-how about how the procedure works, why there could be a reason that you are being deferred, yes or no. So we argue that just from focusing on the attitudes, there should be a differentiated effect from a deferral when you are a first-time donor or when you are an experienced donor. In line with this argumentation, we also see that, for example, subjective norms may lead that people are going to donate blood, but these subjective norms become more strong and more sophisticated if you have donated several times and if you already have, let's say, got some feedback on donation, positive feedback on donation, which will then lead to a higher level of subjective norms. So in this case, we would also argue that based on subjective norms, the first-time donors should behave differently than experienced donors. As you can see from this slide and also from the next slide, there are different streams of theory that support the differentiated view. For example, self-efficacy will also differ across the life cycle. A blood donor identity will also differ across the life cycle. And we also found several other arguments, for example, social identity or habit formation or goal setting or belongingness or the role of past deferrals on subsequent behavior. Now, for example, if you look at the effect of goal setting, for example, a first-time donor does not actually have this kind of goal setting experience. So they don't have these, or not as strong yet, they don't have these personal goals. But the more experienced the donors are, the more they know what kind of goals they can reach. And it can be either highly motivating or demotivating when the specific targets are missed. So when you are a very experienced donor and you really want to achieve your goal, then you are, of course, behaving a bit differently than if you do it for the first time. Now, summarizing, there are numerous theoretical arguments why a deferral might have a different impact across the life cycle. And therefore, we are interested in how strong is this effect. And this is what we're going to test. We do this using a nice data set that was given from the Austrian Red Cross to us. And Edda, would you like to take over, please?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Michel. I think I still need to click.
Here we go.
Yeah. So yeah, as Michel already said, we use data from the Austrian Red Cross. This is donor-specific data containing, on the one side, their donation history. So we have data from more than 123,000 blood donors in Austria, and over a period of more than 5 years, 5.5 years specifically. So we do not only know the donation history, but we also know what happened after that, in the sense whether the donation, whether the people were able to make the donation, or whether they were deferred. And we also know the marketing activity from the Austrian Red Cross. In other words, we know whether a person was contacted from the Austrian Red Cross via direct mail or via text message. And yeah, so what we do is basically we use this donor-specific data in a panel analysis to estimate the effect of deferrals and how it varies depending on the past deferral history in a statistical model. One important thing is that, of course, donors are not eligible to donate every week. So we know that people need to have like a kind of recovery period between donations, right? And so male donors, it varies a little bit between countries, but in Austria and in Germany, for example, male donors, they're eligible to donate up to, I think, 6 times a year, and women up to 4 times a year. And so in order to have an unbiased estimate, we only consider weeks where each individual is eligible to donate. So we exclude those observations or those weeks for a donor where this person is not eligible, cannot donate, basically. And so the final data sets consists of more 3,000 observations, and we use it for our estimation.
Edda, may I help and click to the next slide?
Yes, thank you. So what we do is basically we estimate the effect of deferral on the donation likelihood, and we do this using a Probit model. As Michel said, one important aspect is that deferrals, of course, they do not happen randomly, in the sense that people have different probabilities to be deferred, right? So not everybody has the same probability to get a deferral. So people with poor health, for example, will be deferred with a much higher probability. So there is this selection effect, as we call it. And in order to take care and account for this selection effect, we use a second equation where we estimate the probability of every individual to be deferred depending on a set of regressors, like, you know, the marketing instruments, donor-specific variables. And on top of that, we use 3 instruments in order for this, for the system to be identified, basically. And we construct 3 instruments on the zip level. So we know where people live, among others. And so we construct these 3 additional variables, which represent the number of deferrals in a specific zip code zone, the number of donations in this zone, and the number of, I think, male donations within the zone, the deferral gender. So the share, basically, of male deferred persons to account for the potential gender effects. And all 3 variables, in all 3 variables, the person, one donor itself, themselves is basically excluded. And so because we have 2 binary variables, the donation is 1, 0 and the deferral is 1, 0. We just estimate these 2 Probit equations simultaneously, jointly, basically, with correlated error terms. And by this correlation of the error terms corrects for the potential endogeneity of the deferrals and makes sure that the deferral estimate beta 1 and the interaction effect gamma 1, that they are, no, delta 1, sorry, that they are basically unbiased, are not biased from the selection effect of the different probability of people of being deferred. It was a little bit complicated now, but what we do is basically we take out the endogeneity bias so that the estimates that we have are as accurate as possible. And this is something that other papers typically do not do, right? So other people looked into deferrals, they just use the fact or like a deferral dummy or so, but without looking or correcting for this indigeneity bias. And this is something, well, which is new in this paper that we wrote. So in the model, we have the donation likelihood. So our dependent variable is a binary variable being valued 1 in case that a donor donated in week T, and 0 in case this donor did not donate. And you need to keep in mind that you only look at weeks where a person is eligible, can also donate, right? And then you have a series of independent variables, but the main variable, the most interesting one, the focal one in our model is of course, the deferral variable. And it is also binary and captures whether a person was deferred in the last eligible week, right? So in the last week where this person was able to donate, did their deferral take place or not? And we are also interested to look at the boundary effects, and we determine donor experience, so the number of past donations, as one of the boundary conditions. And so we have a second variable that is operationalized exactly by the number of donations previous to week T. And we build an interaction effect between the deferral variable and this donor experience variable. So basically, this deferral variable and the interaction effect are the two effects that are most interesting in our story. And then, of course, we have a number of controls. We have marketing activities from the Austrian Red Cross. We have text messages, calls, and mailings. So whether a person received one of these marketing instruments in the week prior to week T. We have gender, and we control for blood group effects, because we know that, well, people with different blood groups also have different donation probabilities in general, basically. And last, we control for the donation for some kind of donor loyalty, or donor loyalty, you can say, by the number of years since the first donation, right? So the number of years since the first engagement of a donor with this charity. So these are the descriptive statistics. We see that we have a 19% of the people, or 90% of the observations, we have a donation. And we see that we have a lot of deferrals. 31% of the observations, we see a deferral, right? In the week previous to the, well, to the focal one. We have, well, I'm not going into detail in all of this, into all of this descriptive statistics, but you see that our data is comprehensive. We cover marketing activities from the Austrian Red Cross. We cover donor-specific variables, and the deferral, as I said, is the main variable that we want to estimate the effect of. So let's have a look at the results. As I said, it was a simultaneous estimation. So you see the results of the simultaneous estimation of the donation likelihood, which is the main model, and at the left-hand side, and at the right-hand side, you see the results of this auxiliary equation that we added in order to take care of the indigeneity, basically. So let's start with the right-hand side. There, if you look at the three first rows, we see that, well, the parameters are very low because the value of this three variables is quite high, but you see that they all three are highly significant. And so we can make sure that they are relevant for accounting for this indigeneity bias, right? But this is not what is interesting for us. What is interesting for us, for our story, is the deferral effect. And we do indeed see in the left-hand side results that, first of all, the effect of the deferrals themselves is, as expected, negative, right? So we have this beta, which is highly significant and amounts minus 0.38. And the variables here cannot be interpreted as percentages or elasticities because we have a Probit model, but it shows that the effect is quite substantial. And on top of that, what we wanted to see is whether the deferral effect is moderated by the donation history. And, well, the donation history captures, of course, the number of donations, but also the number of deferrals. So let's first look at the number of donations. we see the interaction effect between deferral and past donations. We see that it's positive and significant, which means that for people who have donated, who have a longer donation history, who are more experienced donors, basically, this negative deferral effect is smaller. So with every additional donation, the negative deferral effect on future donation likelihood becomes smaller. But when people are deferred in the past, we see that the effect is amplified, so it gets even more negative, right? So if a person has been deferred in the past 1, 2, 3, 4 times, this negative effect, which is quantified at minus 1.38, will get even more negative. So this is intensified. And so because we cannot interpret these numbers as elasticities, what we did is we wanted to see, okay, so what happens with the marginal effects, right? So if we express it in percentage of change of the donation likelihood, how do these effects, these marginal effects, as we call them, look like? And this is the visualization of it, because we have two continuous variables that moderate. The one is the number of past donations, and the other one is the number of past deferrals. So what we did is we kind of visualized these different marginal effects, and the curves that you see represent the boundary effect, the two-way interaction between past donations and the deferral for different donor groups. For donor groups who have not been deferred at all, we see the line, that the first upper line, basically, which is like the darkest one. And with this shows that, well, the negative effect is the highest here, right? So we see that it is quite, quite substantial, basically. But we see that still, when they continue donating, so then it recovers. So this negative effect is recovered quite a bit, right? So it goes from -3 to -0.2 for, well, very, very loyal donors. Now, these are the guys that have not, they're first-time donors who have not been deferred at all. Now, if we see those guys who have been deferred quite a lot, let's see like the very last line, because it's the group with the highest number of past deferrals, we see that, well, just for the first-time donors, the decrease in donation likelihood goes from -0.3 to -0.45. This is 55% lower redonation likelihood to the deferral effect. And this is really substantial, and it underlines that the fact, or indicates that managers of blood banks, they really need to take care to look at these different groups of people, not only based on their past donations. So we see the recovery for all groups, right? It still goes up. But if you look at the first-time donors, this decrease in the deferral, this difference of the deferral effect is quite substantial. And so it underlines the fact that there need to be different management policies or communication policies for these different donor groups. And this graphic shows it quite clearly that, we have these differences, and Michel will continue with the implications.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, we have 2 more slides that summarize our discussion. So what Ada has been showing us is that our results clearly show that there is a specific negative effect for new donors. So a new donor that is being deferred is having a general problem in the likelihood of return. So there should be a very specific approach of targeting new donors when they are being deferred. Second, we see that, let me move on just the screen a bit. We see that the impact of a deferral is reduced with the increasing number of donations. So the more experienced a donor is, the less hurtful is a deferral. However, a deferral is always negative. So the impact of a deferral is always negative, but it is not so bad for those that have been donated several times in the past. So the more experienced the donor is, the less negative effect we observe from a deferral. However, it is still a negative effect. However, we also observe that there is an accumulation of a temporary deferral negative effect. That means when you have been deferred in the past already several times, this is not forgotten. It is actually taken over into the next period, or from a marketing perspective, we would argue that there's a certain carryover effect of a negative experience. So it's not only a problem when somebody gets a deferral, but it's even more problematic if this person has been deferred in the past already once or even more times. So what we see is that given these two main moderators that we looked at, which is the number of previous donations and the number of previous deferrals, we argue that there are substantial managerial implications that we can derive from this. First, we argue that there should be a very strong attention on early career donors when they are being deferred. They need to be treated completely differently than people that are being deferred in later stages or people that are not being deferred. So a deferred donor needs special attention, especially if it is at a very early stage of the donation career. Second, blood donation services also should monitor the total number of past deferrals, because given that you observe the past deferrals, which is always in your database, you can simply estimate the potentially negative additional effect of another deferral. So you should not only focus on the number of donations to show or to understand whether a donor is a very loyal donor, but you should also closely monitor the total number of past deferrals. We argue that given the new technology in data science, you should actually automate the donor databases to actually have an automated alert to then identify your groups of donors which are endangered of dropping out. And you should systematically test marketing instruments in order to retain these customers or donors. So overall, we argue that a donation effect is negative. A deferral effect is negative. That's something we knew in the past already, but we show that this is especially negative at a very early stage of the career, and that even actually the number of previous deferrals might actually worsen the whole thing. So when people are being deferred more often, the likelihood that they will drop out is rather high. So this is what we found in our paper. When you have any questions, comments, or remarks, we would be very happy to take these via email or just send us a message and we'll get back to you. And we are looking forward to get your comments and feedback. This is the end of our presentation. I jump to the front. I hope you enjoyed it. Edda, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And we hope you enjoy the talk, and we all wish you a beautiful day, night, or whatever, wherever in the world you currently are. So have a good day from Hamburg and Copenhagen.
Yes.
And bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.